Before this story begins, imagine traveling more than 1,000 miles to marry a man you've never seen, only to discover that the stranger waiting for you is nothing like the man you created in your dreams. Would you run, or would you stay? Today's journey will take you deep into the heart of the American frontier, where first, impressions can destroy a future or save a life. If you love unforgettable Wild West stories filled with emotion, mystery, and powerful endings, make sure you subscribe to Legend of West, because the next chapter of this journey may surprise you more than anything you've watched before. The shrill whistle of a steam locomotive echoed across the dusty plains as clouds of coal smoke rolled over the wooden platform of Dodge Junction in the summer of 1876. The air carried the scent of burning coal, leather saddles, horses, and dry prairie grass stretching farther than the eye could see. Evelyn Harper stepped down from the passenger coach, clutching a worn leather suitcase against her chest. Her elegant emerald green silk dress shimmered beneath the harsh western sun, completely out of place among weather-beaten cowboys and cattle, drovers. Only a few weeks earlier, she had walked through the polished streets of Boston, where ladies admired her fashionable gowns and refined manners. Out here, surrounded by endless prairie, her expensive clothing felt more like a costume than a symbol of grace. At 27 years old, Evelyn had watched her comfortable life disappear after her father's shipping company collapsed during hard financial times. Friends who once praised her beauty quietly vanished, and every marriage proposal disappeared with her family's fortune. Left with little hope, she answered a newspaper advertisement that respectable women whispered about but never admitted reading. She agreed to marry a rancher she had never met, trusting only the letters they exchanged across hundreds of miles. Those letters painted the picture of a thoughtful man who admired books more than money and sunsets more than city parties. He wrote about freedom beneath endless skies, about honest work, and about building a peaceful home beside someone who valued kindness above wealth. Every page made Evelyn believe she had found a gentleman whose heart was richer than any banker in Boston. She imagined silver hair touched by wisdom, polished boots, gentle hands, and a calm smile waiting to welcome her into a beautiful future. The crowd slowly disappeared until only Evelyn remained standing beside the tracks. Her heartbeat grew louder with every passing second. Then a tall figure stepped from the shadow beside the water tower. He wore a dark leather vest over a faded work shirt. Dust covered his boots. A revolver rested naturally at his side, and years beneath the blazing prairie sun had turned his face the color of weathered oak. His beard was neatly trimmed but rugged, and his broad shoulders spoke of endless days spent battling unforgiving land instead of sitting comfortably behind a desk. He stopped several feet away, studying her quietly with steady gray eyes that revealed neither excitement nor fear. "Miss Harper?" he asked in a deep voice roughened by wind and hard labor. Evelyn stared in disbelief. This couldn't be the thoughtful writer whose beautiful words had filled her lonely evenings. "Yes," she answered softly. "I'm Caleb Mercer," the stranger replied. Instead of offering flowers or romantic greetings, he simply lifted her heavy suitcase with one hand. "The wagon is waiting. We've got a long ride before dark." Without another word, he turned toward the dirt road leading away from town. Evelyn hesitated before following him. Every hopeful dream she carried from Boston seemed to crumble beneath each step. She watched the dust cling to the hem of her expensive dress and wondered if she had made the greatest mistake of her life. During the silent walk, she couldn't stop comparing the elegant man she had imagined with the hardened rancher walking ahead of her. This was not the husband she expected. This man looked as though the prairie itself had carved every line into his face. Reaching the wagon, Caleb secured her suitcase before helping her climb aboard with quiet respect. His movements were careful, but completely without romance. As the horses began pulling them toward the endless horizon, Evelyn looked back at the shrinking town. Fighting tears she refused to let him see. She had crossed nearly 1,500 miles chasing hope written in ink. Now she feared she had traded everything she once knew for a stranger whose silence frightened her more than angry words ever could. Somewhere beyond the rolling hills waited the ranch that would become her new home, unless regret convinced her to leave before her new life had truly begun. The wagon rolled across the endless prairie for hours beneath a blazing afternoon sun that seemed determined to test every ounce of Evelyn's strength. The land stretched in every direction like an ocean of golden grass, broken only by distant hills and wandering herds of cattle. There were no grand houses, no busy streets, no comforting church bells, only silence carried by the warm Kansas wind. Caleb kept both hands firmly on the reins, guiding the horses without wasting a single movement. He rarely spoke, and every mile made Evelyn feel farther away from the world she had always known. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, she asked, "Did you truly write those letters?" Caleb glanced toward her without slowing the wagon. "Every word." "Then why do you seem like a completely different man?" she asked. "Your letters sounded as if they came from a professor. Yet you look like someone who belongs in the dirt." Caleb remained quiet for several seconds before answering. "Out here, books don't keep families alive. Strong hands do. I never claimed to be a gentleman living behind polished walls. I only promised to be honest." His calm reply left Evelyn speechless. She looked away, embarrassed by the sharpness of her own words. As evening approached, they finally reached Mercer Ranch. It was smaller than she had imagined, built from sturdy limestone and cedar, standing proudly against the endless prairie. A wooden fence surrounded a modest barn, a vegetable patch, and a small corral where several horses grazed peacefully. Nothing about the place was luxurious, yet everything appeared clean, organized, and carefully maintained. Caleb carried her suitcase inside. The house contained little more than a heavy oak table, a cast-iron stove, handmade shelves, and a fireplace blackened by years of use. Yet one thing immediately caught Evelyn's attention. An entire bookshelf stood against the far wall. She slowly walked toward it, her fingers trembling as she read the familiar titles. Shakespeare, Emerson, Dickens, the same authors they had discussed through countless letters. Every book showed signs of being read many times. Caleb noticed her surprise. "Books kept me company long before I ever hoped someone would walk through that front door." He opened a nearby room. "This will be yours until after our church wedding on Sunday. I'll stay in the barn. I gave you my word that I'd always respect you." Evelyn looked at him with genuine surprise. She had secretly feared traveling so far to marry a stranger, yet this rough rancher had offered her nothing except patience and dignity. After Caleb quietly left the house, she sat alone on the edge of the small bed and finally allowed herself to cry. The beautiful emerald dress she once treasured suddenly felt completely meaningless. The adieu following morning began before sunrise with the steady sound of an axe striking wood. Evelyn tried preparing breakfast but quickly discovered she knew almost nothing about cooking on a wood-burning stove. The biscuits burned until they resembled black stones, and the bacon became nearly impossible to chew. Ashamed, she placed the meal on the table expecting criticism. Caleb simply smiled faintly, thanked her, and ate every bite without complaint. The next morning she tried again. This time the biscuits were uneven but edible. Caleb broke one apart, nodded once, and quietly said, "Better than yesterday." Those 3 words somehow meant more to Evelyn than compliments she had received during years of city life. As the days passed, she began helping around the ranch. Carrying buckets from the well left painful blisters across her soft hands. Sweeping the porch filled her expensive shoes with dust. Washing clothes beneath the blazing sun exhausted every muscle in her body. Each evening she collapsed into bed wondering how anyone survived such a difficult life. Yet every dawn she rose again before Caleb, determined to learn something new. One evening, after finishing work in the fields, Caleb sat quietly on the porch while the prairie glowed beneath a brilliant orange sunset. From his pocket he removed a small wooden flute worn smooth by years of careful use. Slowly, he began playing a simple melody. The first notes were rough, but then Evelyn recognized the tune instantly. It was Mozart, one of the first compositions she had ever performed as a music teacher back in Boston. She stared at him in complete disbelief. "Where did you learn that?" she whispered. Caleb lowered the flute and smiled for the first time since they had met. "My mother taught music before we moved west. This flute belonged to her. It's all I have left." In that quiet moment, Evelyn finally saw beyond the weathered clothes, the calloused hands, and the rugged appearance. Sitting beside her wasn't the uncivilized cowboy she had imagined at the train station. He was the same thoughtful man whose letters had crossed hundreds of lonely miles and quietly healed her broken heart. Perhaps she had judged him far too quickly. And perhaps the greatest mistake she almost made wasn't traveling west. It was believing appearances could ever reveal the true measure of a person's soul. Sunday morning arrived beneath a sky as clear as polished glass. The little wooden church stood alone on the prairie, surrounded by wagons, horses, and a handful of neighboring ranch families. Evelyn no longer wore her elegant city hat. Instead, she braided her hair simply and covered her emerald dress with a plain, white apron she had stitched herself during the week. Caleb wore a freshly washed white shirt, his boots polished as well as frontier life allowed. When the preacher asked if she accepted this man as her husband, Evelyn looked into Caleb's steady gray eyes and answered without hesitation, "I do." This time the words came from her heart instead of hope alone. Their marriage had officially begun, but life on the frontier wasted no time testing every promise they had made. Weeks later, the summer heat became unbearable. Day after day, the sky remained empty, and the fields slowly turned from green to lifeless brown. Every morning, Caleb worked from sunrise until long after dark, digging deeper into the stubborn earth searching for water. His hands bled, his shoulders ached, and exhaustion settled across his face. Evelyn refused to watch him struggle alone. She learned to milk cows, preserve vegetables, repair torn clothes, and ride horseback across the ranch carrying supplies. The woman who once worried about stained gloves now measured each day by how much work she accomplished before sunset. One afternoon, an eerie silence settled across the prairie. The birds disappeared. Even the wind seemed to stop breathing. Then a strange roar echoed across the horizon. Evelyn stepped onto the porch and froze in horror. A massive black cloud raced toward the ranch, but it wasn't rain. Millions of hungry grasshoppers darkened the sky like a living storm. Within minutes, they covered fences, rooftops, fields, and trees. Every green leaf disappeared beneath countless wings. Caleb galloped home as fast as his horse could run. "Inside," he shouted. "Lock every window." They watched helplessly from inside the house as the insects devoured months of hard work. Wheat vanished. Corn disappeared. Even the small garden Evelyn had carefully planted was stripped bare. When the swarm finally drifted away 3 endless days later, the ranch looked like a lifeless desert. Caleb walked into the ruined field and slowly fell to his knees. Years of determination collapsed beneath the weight of heartbreak. Evelyn hurried to him, wrapped both arms around his shoulders, and held him while tears rolled silently down her face. "Everything is gone," Caleb whispered. "I failed you." Evelyn gently lifted his face toward hers. "No," she answered firmly. "Fields can grow again. Houses can be rebuilt. As long as we're together, nothing that truly matters has been lost." Caleb looked at her with quiet amazement. The frightened woman who stepped off the train weeks earlier had disappeared forever. Standing beside him now was a partner strong enough to face any storm. They survived the difficult winter through sacrifice and determination. Evelyn sold her expensive dresses in town and gave music lessons to local children in exchange for flour, beans, and firewood. Caleb accepted dangerous freight jobs across snow-covered trails, often spending weeks away from home. During those lonely nights, they continued writing letters to one another, just as they had before meeting. Only now the letters weren't about dreams. They were about real love built through hardship, trust, and unwavering loyalty. Spring finally returned. Gentle rains soaked the thirsty earth, and tiny green shoots pushed through the soil once more. Year after year, the ranch slowly prospered. They built a larger home, planted orchards, raised healthy children, and filled the house with both books and music. Travelers often spoke about the remarkable woman who arrived wearing an elegant city dress and became one of the strongest women on the frontier. Whenever young brides asked Evelyn the secret to a happy marriage, she smiled and pointed toward the weathered porch where Caleb always sat watching the sunset. Never judge a heart by the dust on a man's boots, she would say. Character isn't found in soft hands or expensive clothes. It's revealed when life becomes difficult. Many years later, as Caleb rested during his final evening beneath the glowing prairie sky, he gently squeezed Evelyn's hand and whispered, "The greatest treasure I ever discovered wasn't hidden beneath this land. It stepped off a train carrying a single suitcase." Evelyn smiled through tears, remembering the fear she had felt on that distant station platform. She had believed she was walking toward the worst mistake of her life. Instead, she had unknowingly walked into the greatest blessing she would ever receive. Sometimes destiny arrives wearing dusty boots instead of polished shoes, and sometimes the stranger you almost walk away from becomes the person your heart was searching for all along. Thank you for riding across the Wild West with Legend of West. If this unforgettable journey touched your heart, subscribe now and join us for more powerful frontier stories, where courage, love, and hope are always waiting just beyond the horizon.